Good day, everyone, and thank you for standing by. Welcome to the Importance of Co-Parenting and Relationship Skills, Helping Fathers Help Their Children webinar. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the webinar over to Nigel Van. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I'd like to welcome everybody to our National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse webinar for the day. As you see, we are focusing on co-parenting relationship skills with the subtitle of Helping Fathers Help Their Children, which is obviously a main goal of all fatherhood work. You know, if we're doing fatherhood work, we're trying to improve child well-being. I think one of the hardest areas to help dads in with this is often the co-parenting, particularly if they're not in the same home as the mother and there's not a very good relationship, and there's often, you know, very complicated situations and relationships involved. So given the effect that this can all have on the children, it's extremely important that we talk about this, and that's what we're going to do today. So first of all, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the Clearinghouse. Well, actually, before I do that, let me just point out the boxes to you for those of you who are joining for the first time. I see quite a few folk have found the chat box and they're introducing yourself, and we do encourage you to do that and share information. Right below the chat box, we have various web links, mainly for the Clearinghouse, but there's a couple of other ones under there as well. You can click on the website for the various presenters that we have today. That they've all got their websites up there. I was just checking to see what was there. And then we have various downloadable resources that we'll say a little bit more about in a minute. And then next to that, you have the Ask a Question box. And this is where we ask you to put any questions that you may have for the presenters. And then at the end of the webinar, we will get to as many of those questions as we can. If there are any questions that we don't get to, we will post some written responses to those as much as we can. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording, a transcript, and all the presentation materials will be posted on our website in the next month or so. So we always encourage you to check back and review that and all previous webinars. They're all on the same website, fatherhood.gov/webinars. So with that, let me go to these first few slides just to give you this quick overview of the Clearinghouse. We are funded through the Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families Office of Family Assistance, and they provide the funds that support this Clearinghouse and the work we do to support fathers, fatherhood programs, researchers, and policymakers. And you can, if you haven't found our website yet, we're at fatherhood.gov. I'm going to mention a little bit more about our toolkit, which is at fatherhood.gov/toolkit. I've already mentioned the webinars link, and that's our email, help@fatherhood.gov.info. Any feedback you have for us, any questions, feel free to send them there. And you're going to hear more also today about our national call center. I always stress this on our webinars, 1-877-4DAD-411. We actually have a staff member from the call center as one of our presenters today. So you're going to learn a lot more about their work. And as always, you can engage with us on Facebook or Twitter. And so for today's webinar, again, we're going to look at some of these complicated situations that fathers and mothers are faced with. You know, often there's a lot of frustration on both parts. It's I've been through this personally myself. I know what it's like to go through a divorce and try and work out a co-parenting relationship. It can be done, but it's not always easy. So the more support that we can offer fathers, be it personal relationship issues, be it any kind of legal issues, any child support issues, you know, fatherhood programs are well equipped to provide this, as are other family support programs. So we've got quite a lineup for you of presenters today. I'm going to briefly go over their bios now. You can download the full bios from the downloadable resources box. You can also download a helpful resources list that has links to various resources that the presenters are going to refer to today, also to other books and articles that practitioners and fathers may find helpful in terms of this topic. And then there's a few handouts as well. You'll see something called Parenting Apart Communication Skills, Parenting Apart Packet, and some co-parenting tips. We're going to refer to those towards the end of the webinar, but you can click on any of these things during the webinar and download them. They're also going to be available on the website to download when we post all the webinar materials. And you can download today's slides from that box as well. So with that, let me just briefly introduce you to our presenters. So James McHale has done an awful lot of research in the field of co-parenting. He's been writing on this topic since 1996. He's a family therapist by training, and he is professor and director of the Family Study Center at the University of South Florida in St. Petersburg, Florida. Today he's going to share a lot about his work, and he's also going to tell you about some ongoing work which is designed to help expectant unmarried African-American parents build and sustain positive co-parenting alliances. So James will be kicking us off, and then we'll be hearing from Aaron Ivchenko, who I mentioned is with the National Call Center. He's also Child Finder America. They're a subcontractor on this project. Aaron has over 16 years of experience in the field of child safety and crisis management. As a trained mediator with Child Finder America, he provides conflict resolution services for parents in challenging parenting apart situations. And he's also, as I mentioned, a case manager for our National Call Center, where he responds to calls, connects fathers with support and information, and provides mediation services between parents when possible. Then we've got Carolyn and Philip Cowan, who are emeritus professors at the University of California in Berkeley. They have written extensively on fatherhood work. They've had a great impact on the development of fatherhood and parenting programs, and not just in California, but also across the country and in the UK. They've co-directed 2 longitudinal studies of how family relationships affect children's adaptations. They've authored numerous journal articles and written several books. With Marcia and Kyle Pruitt, they developed the Supporting Father Involvement project, and you see a website link for that project in the web link box. And that was a group intervention for parents of young children and designed to strengthen parents' relationships as parents and partners. And we're going to be hearing more about that from Carolyn and Phil today. And as part of their presentation, really, we're going to do they're going to start, and then Marc will come in, and then Carolyn and Phil will come back, because Marc's program in Oklahoma is Marc Taylor's program in Oklahoma called True Dads, is implementing various aspects of the work that Carolyn and Phil have developed. Marc's been leading the True Dads program since late 2015, and since then they have successfully served over 1,000 fathers and their co-parents. So he'll be sharing some very interesting information on that program. And then after he's done that, Carolyn and Phil will come back on and share some preliminary findings from their research into that project. So with that, we're going to have a couple of quick poll questions, and then I'm going to give the floor to James. So Enzo, can you pull up the first poll question? And we do this just to get a sense of who's on the webinar, so we can understand who we're talking to here. We get that poll question, Enzo? It seems like we have a problem with that right now. So let's come back to that. So let me give the mic to you, James, and I'll move to your slide here, and then we'll. Oh, I'm sorry. Enzo was waiting for me to do this. Yeah, I thought I was going straight to James. I just wanted to point out that we do have these resources available on the fatherhood.gov website, and I'm going to say a little bit more towards the end of the webinar on what we have in the toolkit, but there is a section there that's very relevant to co-parenting, and we also have a brief that's coming out in 2019 where we will be talking about co-parenting relationships, and I'll mention a little bit of that later. And I think my internet has gone down, so I'm just going to, Enzo, are you there and able to put the poll questions up? If not, then I'm going to give the mic to James. Okay, if you'd like to take over, James, and move the slides. My internet has gone down, so I can't move them.
Okay, I'm actually seeing poll results on my screen.
Oh, okay, that's why I wasn't seeing that. I'm very sorry. That's because my internet's gone down. So as soon as that, have we had the first question? Have we had the first question or the second question up there?
It was, I saw responses to the first question, and it looks like a diverse audience. There are folks who work with kids, there's folks who work with moms, there's folks who work with fathers. The greatest number is folks who work with dads, but a fair number of people who work with kids and mothers as well.
Okay, great. Okay. So Enzo, I apologize for not knowing you were doing that. Could you put the second question up real quick too before James starts? Is that on the screen now, James?
The results kind of shift in a fluid way, so I think people are voting now. So maybe we hang on for about 30 seconds and just see where things land. But it looks like about half the people are saying that they rarely work with fathers who have all their kids together in the same household. So there are folks who work with dads who are co-residential with kids, but it's looking like the majority of folks work with dads who are not co-residential.
Okay, yeah, and that is certainly what we expected, yeah. So, okay. Okay, well, if you're ready to get started, James, I'll let you take over, and then I'm going to move to a different room here and see if I can get my internet sorted out, but I'll be listening. So the floor is yours, James.
I appreciate that, and I also appreciate you letting me use a photo that's about 15 years old. If only I still look like that, I would be in Pig 7. But I wanted to say a couple words just by way of introduction about the funding for the work I'm going to be describing. I've been very grateful to the National Institutes of Health who have supported this work since 1996 through a series of grants, but we've also received funding from a number of other sponsors. The Brady Education Foundation really jump-started the work that we're going to be talking about today with African-American parents. Their mission is closing the educational gap between black and white children, and this is the only project that they ever funded where they were investing funds before the child was even born in closing that gap. So I think they saw the wisdom of trying to start the child out in life on a path with strong co-parenting. And locally, our Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County has been incredibly supportive of the work. So we've been grateful for, local, federal sponsors and foundations as well in helping us move this work forward. The Family Study Center that I direct at USF St. Petersburg is a relatively unique center on the national scene. All of the work that we do at the Family Study Center is concerned with promoting co-parenting alliances and families. And I deliberately asked that we have the graphics that you're seeing here because we define co-parenting as an every child construct. And so today we're here to talk about co-parenting between mothers and fathers, whether together or apart. But children are also raised in co-parenting relationships and families where the co-parents are parents and grandparents. In multi-generational families, kids are raised in families where the one parent is in one country and another parent is in another country, but they're still co-parenting. Deployed military families, families where kids have been placed in foster care and the co-parenting relationship is between the biological and foster parents. And so we try to understand the family systems that support every child, and that's our mission at the Family Study Center. We're going to be focusing specifically on work today that involves fathers, but we understand that every child is co-parented. We just need to understand who's in that co-parenting system. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to start this webinar by kind of taking a 1,000 miles up look at co-parenting. I know our other speakers are going to get into the weeds in terms of ways of helping the families, and I'll talk a little bit about that myself, but I think it's really important in order to do co-parenting work effectively to have a very grounded and thorough understanding of what co-parenting actually involves. If you think about what I said a moment ago, that every child is co-parented, we just need to understand the family system, then this is really the only viable definition of co-parenting, the mutual joint efforts of adults raising children for whom they share responsibility. And this is a pretty inclusive definition that I think would fit every family, every child. So we're not just defining it in terms of the romantic or committed relationship between the child's biological mom and dad, but it's whomever is in the child's family system. Those are the folks who want to get together to work effectively on the child's behalf. And so this is the definition that we use to define co-parenting, to understand children and their family systems, and to strengthen the co-parenting alliances that support their development. So this is a slide I want to dwell on for just a couple of minutes because regardless of who the child's co-parents are, if the co-parenting alliance is going to function effectively, these four things need to happen. These are the elements of co-parenting that support children's social and emotional development and health. The first is the one I think that everybody was drawn to the webinar today to focus on, support and solidarity between the parenting figures, and specifically between the child's mom and dad in the case of co-parenting that involves fathers. And we will hear, I think, a fair amount later on today about some ways to help promote problem-solving communication between moms and dads on the child's behalf. But this is only square one. Really, it's sort of the gateway in to make sure that the other three things happen. And these are also core elements of co-parenting that it's very important to be holding in mind. Where we're trying to get is consistency and predictability in the ways that the different caregivers are guiding the child's development. Every mom and dad have different ways of being with their kids, and kids love that. They love the difference between their parents. That's not what I'm talking about with consistency and predictability. What I'm talking about here is the importance that the parents have an agreement, especially with very young children, but with older kids too, about ways that they're going to go about parenting. You can take something as simple as the use of a pacifier in a young child who's spending time in two different households. If the child is using a pacifier in one household and then is in the other household and gets upset and is not given a pacifier, it becomes difficult for that baby or young toddler to regulate themselves, and the result can be sleep disturbances, it can be emotional outbursts, it can be a number of different things. If that child is using a pacifier in foster care and goes home for a visit with biological parents, and the biological parents don't use a pacifier, the child gets upset, gets disrupted, goes back to the foster parents, and the system says, wow, it looks like that was a failed overnight. I wonder if we're going to be able to reunify the kid. And it was over a simple pacifier, the use of a pacifier. Not simple, but the kinds of strategies that we need to use, whether or not you're going to respond to the baby when they're crying, where the baby's sleeping, the kinds of things that help the child to learn how to regulate. Parents do need to be on the same page about that, whether they're parenting together in one household or across different households. So the consistency and predictability is something that we really want to broker between the parents so that kids are getting the best and most predictable support that they can for their emotional and social development. Security and integrity is another thing that derives from positive co-parenting. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about the child living in a single household with mom and dad or across multiple households. If the co-parents are working well together, the child is going to develop a sense that my family is together, my family is unified, my family is not broken. But if the co-parents are not working well together, then the child begins to dwell upon the insecurity in their family base. We tend to think and talk about security of the child with mom and the security of the child with dad, and absolutely that's a thing. But the family is also creating a sense of family-level security through their work together as co-parents. If they work effectively, the child feels safe, secure, confident in their family system. If they're not, the child feels that the family is fragmented, and that affects the child's development. So this is a really important component of effective co-parenting work, is to build that sense of security in the family's home base, whether it's one household or multiple. And the last one that's on there, accurate attunement to the child's fears, needs, wishes, and sensibilities. We know from a lot of work that in families where co-parenting is not going well, mom and dad actually see the child differently. When they're describing the child and their adjustments and their problems, it's almost like they're seeing a different kid. And you can imagine if the parents have different ideas about whether the child is, depressed, or the child is suffering from anxiety, or the child has ADHD symptoms, or, whatever it might be, and they can't even get on the same page about that, the way that they're going to support one another in co-parenting that child is not going to be very helpful to the child. So I think that understanding the child, not just, I think he has ADHD, no, I don't think he has ADHD, but really being attuned to what's going on with the child, that's what we mean by accurate attunement, and both parents need to be on the same page about that. So I spent a little extra time on this one slide, and this next slide is one I just want to say a couple more words about as well, and then I'll move a bit more quickly. I'm not going to talk about the first point here, that co-parenting affects children's social and emotional development. We've got lots of research suggesting that that's true. What I did want to talk about is the importance of understanding co-parenting as a triangular construct. Every family in which a child has a mom and dad, there is that triangle. And I think most people, unfortunately, who work with families don't honor that triangle. They tend to see families more as a 1+2 system, and here's what I mean by that. We tend to, for the folks who are on the line who work with moms and had Healthy Start motherhood programs, we see the mother-child bond as the primary bond, and then if dad happens to be out there and involved, we involve him and bring him in. But that's a 2+1 system. It's mom and child plus dad if he happens to be out there. Every one of those children is also embedded within a family triangle. So children whose dads are incarcerated, children whose dads have been deported, children whose dads are overseas in the military, those are still triangles. And if we understand the family as a triangle, then the work we do with the family on behalf of the child will be very different than if we understand the family as a mom and child plus a dad who we're trying to engage. I could talk for an hour about that concept, but I think it's really important that we use the concept of triangles to understand co-parenting and guide all of our work with families. This slide I insisted that we include. This is a book that we published back in 2011, Chris Lindahl and I. And on the left is the original version of the cover of the book that the American Psychological Association sent to me. And I refused to have the book published with that cover. And we had a very prolonged discussion about whether co-parenting was spelled with a hyphen or not. And the point that I made, and finally won, was that when you have a hyphen in co-parenting, it's emphasizing distance, that people are co-parenting at a distance. Co-parenting without a hyphen, bringing the word together, is what we want to achieve and accomplish for the child, regardless of whether the parents are living in the same household or not. Co-parenting hyphenless is really what we're trying to create for kids, the actual solidarity of the family. And so I hope that we can move away from using the hyphen. We've seen a big change on that in the published literature over the last 15 years, and I hope that that trend continues. With unmarried families, the challenges are great, and you all know that. Everybody on the line knows that. What I wanted to say about this, though, is that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to working with these families. Enzo mentioned divorced families. Unmarried parents is whom we do a lot of our work with, but unmarried parents differ greatly from one another as well. Some of them have never started a relationship at all, but have a baby on the way. Others are in a relationship they've been in for a while and are more or less committed, even though they may not be living together. And in other families that have never married, it actually feels like a divorce because there's been an acrimonious split up. Maybe one or both parents took on different partners. And so there's a lot of animosity. And the ways of working with these families are going to necessarily have to be different. There's not just going to be one set of principles that works for all. What we've developed is a focused co-parenting consultation that I wanted to describe just very, very briefly. And I'm not going to go through the whole model, but the notion of the focused co-parenting consultation is that when we bring the parents together, we're coming together to talk about co-parenting and only co-parenting. And this is very different and distinct, I think, from what we'll be hearing from our other speakers. The parents make a pact with the folks working with them that if they get off track and they're not talking about co-parenting anymore, we're going to bring them back onto co-parenting again. And if they can't stay, we're going to stop doing that work. because the co-parenting work is sacred. Yes, the in-laws are important. Yes, religion's important. Yes, money is important. Yes, other things are important. But we're there to talk about the kids and about co-parenting. And so the consciousness-raising phase of the work is the most important phase. I'll circle back to that in just a minute. The skill building in terms of problem solving and communication, I think we'll hear more from Marc and from Phil and Carolyn about. I think I learned a great deal from Phil and Carolyn about effective ways of working with couples. And the work that we do is not all that different or distinctive from good couples work. But the consciousness-raising phase about why co-parenting is important is really crucial. Our work most recently has been focused on serving unmarried African-American parents. And when we began this work, we spent a great deal of time talking with folks in the African-American community leaders who have been working with young parents for a generation, and were assured by Pastor Murphy, Reverend Lewis Murphy, was the one who said, co-parenting is what we do in the African-American community. This is a concept that fits and that works. We know from other folks' research that unmarried African-American dads are very connected with their kids. I think the myth of father absence, particularly in the African-American community, is way off base. African-American dads know who their kids are and stay connected with them through time. And the doing of co-parenting work in African-American communities is complicated because parents in those communities have often had some negative experiences with programs in the past that were ostensibly going to be helpful to their family, and then the families discovered after entering that, no, in fact, this is not helping at all. These folks don't really understand my family at all. And so there's a wariness, a justified wariness, I think, in the African-American community about taking part in programs. Our tack was to really involve the community in developing and designing the intervention so that not only was it culturally competent, I think all interventions need to be culturally competent, but it also spoke to the realities on the ground for families. We kind of met them where they were, the things that we were talking about what's happening with African American children in our community and how important it is to bring parents together so that your kids don't suffer some of those same challenges, was really a message that resonated with families. So it wasn't just that African Americans were part of our staff and were involved in building the intervention. They helped create it from the bottom up and to deliver the message in the community. This program is okay. This program is here to support you. The desire to work together was there already. It was tapping into the social capital. What we were able to demonstrate in the Brady Foundation funded study was that African American parents did benefit greatly from taking part in a focused co-parenting consultation intervention. This is published work, and I have just one slide from the work here to show changes in problem solving and communication that took place following a 6-session co-parenting intervention during the pregnancy. And again, remember, these were parents who were largely non-co-residential, were not married, may or may not have been considering a committed relationship with one another, but came together to talk about co-parenting their shared child. And we were able to see major and significant changes in communication support, positive affect cohesiveness, and also declines in coerciveness, negativity, argumentation, those kinds of things. So dramatic changes after just 6 sessions from parents who came together to talk about their shared child. We did not get into relationships. We didn't get into many of the other kinds of things that would ordinarily be talked about with dads, but we focused specifically on their co-raising of the shared child. After the child was born, we brought the families back together, and this is some of the first imagery in the history of this country that shows a triangle, a mother and a father and a baby together in an unmarried family system where the parents are not living together. But that triangle is developing. That baby knows who both their mom and the dad are. We hear a lot about maternal gatekeeping, but following this intervention, when the families came to play together, not only did the babies know who their dads were, but when they played together with their dads during this triangular interaction, moms were supportive. And so the moms were already supporting the developing baby-dad alliance. This is a 3-month-old you see in this picture. So we felt as though we were successful in helping to cultivate the beginnings of a co-parenting alliance in families where it may not have otherwise occurred without those co-parenting conversations during the pregnancy. The slide on the right just shows, hey, guess what? When babies made a bid to dad, dads were responsive. Dads come into fatherhood with these intuitive parenting skills that moms do. They do respond to their babies when the babies bid to them, and the moms are supportive of those. So this is published work with Erica Coates that folks can read more about. This is, I think, the second to last slide. I know I'm out of time. But what I wanted to say is that what's very important about the consciousness raising phase of focused co-parenting consultation is the goal is to really help get both mom and dad on the same page about why it is that they're doing this. And the focus there is really on building security for the child, for the shared child. This is something that you can get both unmarried parents and high conflict post-divorce parents to agree upon by doing some hard work and staying focused on the child and the child's emotions within the family triangle. It takes some work to get there, but that's what often will bring parents together. The work that we're doing now is also come one, come all, and the adage has been in our field to not do dyadic work. Our work is dyadic, I need to say that. It's not group work and it's not individual work with dads. We work with parents together, and it's very challenging to get them together. It takes a lot of pre-work to make that happen. As part of that pre-work, we're also making sure that mom feels safe being part of the intervention. And if mom feels safe, whether there's arguing and screaming and yelling, or we even have some low-level aggression in the family, but the goal is to try to get the couples together to work safely with them so that when the baby comes, that has been belonged and helped with. And so we've seen 140 families so far in our current NIH-funded study. We were able to safely randomize 120 of those. 20 of the moms felt they didn't feel safe. The other 120 did feel safe. And once enrolled, we only had to withdraw 5 of those 120 moms. So we're going to be able to provide some data in a couple of years on the possibility of doing this work in families that often have not been engaged in the work because people wonder whether it's safe to do so. Safety always comes first. We would never put couples together where we were increasing the likelihood of violence, but what we're discovering is that it's possible to work with many families where there's high conflict in a way that's safe, effective, and that supports the baby. So folks who want to learn more can visit the Family Study Center website. It's located on the slide right here, usfst.edu/FSC. Thanks very much for the time today.
Okay, well, thank you very much, James. Yeah, and thanks for helping me out there at the beginning. I've actually been back on the internet and I've lost it again now. I'm going to look into another possibility here, but in the meantime, let me just pass this over to Aaron, and Aaron, tell us all about the great work you're doing there, please.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everybody. My name is Aaron Evchenko, and I will be talking very briefly today about our program, Child Find of America, and the Parent Help program. I've had the privilege of working for Child Find of America for 10 years now. And every day I am learning something new. And I see that I cannot flip the slide here. I do not see the arrows on my, oh, thank you. Okay, in essence, this is Child Find of America and the services we provide. We are a missing children's organization, essentially, and have been so since our founding about 39 years ago. I was founded in 1980. By the mother of a missing child in upstate New York, which is actually where we're currently located. Following a contentious custody battle, at the time there was really limited law enforcement response to this kind of situation, really no laws regarding parental or family abduction. Little was understood about the impact that such a thing can have on a child. So Child Find was founded. You can see our mission is really to provide professional services designed to prevent and resolve child abduction and the family conflicts that can lead to them. Over the years, through time, Child Find has evolved in many ways. And you can see down near the bottom how we essentially have 4 arms of Child Find of America. Of course, in regards to missing children's issues, whether it's a parental abduction, which is most common with us, or runaway. We have location services. You can see, though, in the middle, though, we have what we call the Parent Help program. This developed about mid-90s, really to try to be a preventive service and to try to get out in front of these issues, essentially addressing parenting apart and co-parenting through the lens of conflict skill management, mediation. Our services are free. They always have been. They are confidential. They're phone-based. They are open-ended. people can call us once or many times. It could be a brief call, or it could last months, if not years, over time. We're talking oftentimes with mothers, fathers, grandparents, relative caregivers, you name it, young fathers, putative fathers. And essentially, we are constantly seeking any opportunity to improve on the co-parenting relationship. Our focus is essentially, however, on the child, and seeking, stability, an improvement on the conditions surrounding that child's life. Our mission is to keep children in a safe and legal environment. And again, we really look at our work through the lens of mediators. On average, we receive about 750 cases a year. Since our founding, we've talked to nearly 20,000 families. So we've kind of pooled a lot of information over the years and used that to improve our work. All right, next slide. And part of the evolution of parent help is to find connections, or to actually assist fathers who call 4Dad 411. 4Dad 411 is NRFC helpline, which essentially, we answer. We partner with the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse to answer these calls, and we'll often be speaking with fathers who are looking for support in any number of areas. It could be assistance with family court. They might call regarding paternity, child welfare issues, financial needs, child support. Often, first step as a 4Dad 411 representative, we will look for any resources and information, on the website. We will connect callers with programs that might meet those needs. However, when their needs are outside those services provided through 4Dad 411, we will also connect callers with the Parent Help Program. And so that would include challenges in parenting apart with family court, child welfare, as I just mentioned. We receive about 500 calls, more emails per year. And I think on average we get, a Parent Help receives about 350 referrals from 4Dad 411 every year, so you can see there's certainly, there's a lot of a need out there. Also, I would mention that we receive a lot of calls from practitioners in the field, those who are looking to develop or enhance their Responsible Fatherhood program, often talking about the Responsible Fatherhood Toolkit. I would encourage you all to check it out. And of course, just helping anyone with a question in regards to research that's also available on the website. Okay. Okay, so this slide is full of information. It essentially serves to represent our process in trying to understand the whole human that we are speaking with on the phone. People come to us with, not just co-parenting issues, but any number of challenges in their life, and we just try our best to get a good sense of what's happening before we make any attempt to address, whatever the goal is. Our process is just through our intake to gather information and understand what challenges might get in the way of co-parenting. And if possible, to address those first. And we would do so not exclusively, but by always seeking to surround the parent, mother or father with any local services, any supportive programs that can address those concrete needs. Okay, next slide. Okay, this slide really we use in some of our presentations. It's from Howard Yom's book, Divorce-Induced Emotions and the Healing Paradigm. Essentially, it serves to demonstrate how, when encountering parents who are separated or have experienced some level of loss, that emotion you might be encountering might not be representative of that person in general. These experiences, whether it be separation, loss, unfulfilled dreams, or an adversarial system such as family court, these can cause emotions to escalate. It can turn anxiety into panic, disappointment to become betrayal, suspicion to paranoia. So it's just important for us as direct service providers to keep that in mind, and also be seeking to find ways to de-escalate, so that we can be at a problem-solving mode with a parent. And next slide. So as you can see, we really like spectrums at ChildFind. Here's another spectrum. This is family conflict continuum, and as I said before, we're always seeking for opportunities to improve on the co-parenting relationship. We do that through conflict skills resolution and mediation. We're all trained mediators here. We look at all these relationships in terms of not only conflict, but the degree of conflict that is present and what impact it could have on the child. So of course, there are some which are, they present a greater risk, some levels of conflict to a child than others. On the left-hand side, you have transformative conflicts. In our view, conflict is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a good thing. In healthy relationships, it offers opportunity to improve on our understanding of each other. It only exists because of differences we have, but each conflict is really an opportunity in our view. However, you can see that running down the spectrum, you can move into chronic conflict and high conflict situations, and prolonged exposure of this kind of conflict, of course, can lead to harmful results with children. And on the far right, you'll see the phrase adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with ACEs, but that does inform our work, and certainly we seek to avoid those at all costs. Next slide. And we also like to recognize that, because of systems like family court or child protective services, that there are occasions where, co-parenting may not be possible or at the time, or that we just have to find ways to improve the co-parenting situation through other means. This is a simple spectrum that shows how you can move from many opportunities on the left by agreement to less, to restricted situations, to supervised visitation, to denied access to children as you become perhaps involved in situations where there's an increased risk to the child. And we receive calls across the spectrum, and we have to always keep our ears open for those opportunities, but also for those risks to the child. Next slide. And we are mediators, as I said before. This is a very simple slide defining mediation. It's as the slide says, it's a process that's impartial. It involves a third party. It exists to facilitate communication. We're trained transformative mediators. Another spectrum you could think of is, on one side, mediation being very hands-off, non-facilitative. That's transformative mediation. We essentially seek to identify what's important to the parents, what their values are, seek to find common ground through those values. On the far end of the other side, you'd find more facilitative mediation or arbitration. And oftentimes you'll find that level of mediation connected to a court. We're not connected to family court in any way. We don't tell people what's in their best interests. We're here to just help clarify what those are. it's voluntary, it's thoughtful, it's respectful, and it's confidential. And that is certainly one element of our casework that we find really helps is offering confidentiality, because oftentimes, the conflict that we're discussing, these are very personal and emotional issues, and it really allows for a thorough explanation of what's going on. And that might be it. Oh, okay. This is a resource that we use in oftentimes in reaching out to the other parent. It's called the Parenting Apart Packet, and includes just quite a few tools, I would call them, for using and essentially creating a parenting plan. There's a parenting time calendar. There's also a communication skills worksheet and child fundamental rights. We might discuss this a little bit later in the presentation, I think, but I put this here just to demonstrate that we have tools that we can reference throughout the process. They don't apply to every parenting apart situation or co-parenting situation, but it is available, especially in cases where we are reaching out to the other parent and inviting a discussion about the conflict. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Aaron, and we will, if we have time at the end, spend a bit more time having a look at that Parenting Apart packet. It is available there in the downloadable resources box, along with a communication skills, which is just one page from that packet. So we do encourage you to have a look at that. So with that, let me bring up Phil and Carolyn, and the time is yours. And then as you have done with your first few slides, please pass it on to Marc. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil and I are delighted to be part of this webinar today. Based on James McHale's plea today, we think we'll take the hyphen out of our co-parenting title from now on. We have debated about it back and forth, and he was quite convincing. So we're going to be talking about parenting interventions that we've had experience with, but with an eye to facilitating children's development. And one of the things that struck us many, many years ago when we began this work was that parenting classes are attended almost entirely by mothers, and now many home visiting programs also are directed primarily to mothers of children. There have been now a number of father involvement projects across the country and across the world, really, and and one, usually it's men meeting with men. And what this does is it ignores the relationship between the parents, both as couples and as co-parenting teams. Yet we know now from much systematic research and clinical work that in married, cohabiting, and divorced families, the most important predictor of fathers' involvement with their children is the quality of the father's relationship with the child's mother. So our approach has been a co-parenting approach to enhancing fathers' involvement with their children and with the mothers of their children or their co-parents. And we realize that the idea of groups for both parents may be quite a different approach from the kind of fatherhood involvement interventions some of you on the webinar are undertaking. And some of you may be dealing with fathers who've been separated from their families for a long time, which is a really hard way to go. But our idea was to intervene earlier, preventively, before the fathers become disconnected from their children and from their partners, and their problems seem too difficult to resolve. So, and our experience has been, arguing against people who say fathers won't come, is that if you believe in the co-parent approach, it is possible to get both parents to come if you get in early enough. And if you really work at it, for example, using male staff to recruit men and being clear that this program is to help foster the positive development of their children, which many, many people will respond to. So in most of the work we do, we're working from a family systems model where there are 5 aspects of family life that we focus on in our work with fathers and mothers or fathers and co-parents. How they're doing as individuals, how each of them is doing in their relationship with their child or children, what's going on in the relationship between them. We spend quite some time on family of origin stories and what they're trying to carry over from the past and what it is they want to change. And then we also focus on their actual stressors and the supports they have in their lives. So I'm going to start by talking mostly about the Supporting Father Involvement Project, which for 10 years was funded by the California Office of Child Abuse Prevention. And this work we did with Marcia Klein-Pruitt from Smith College and Kyle Pruitt from Yale University. And you'll see there's a link there to a website where you can get more information about our published work. We love this logo. We took this as our logo. It's a sculpture by an Israeli sculptress, because if you look very carefully, you'll see who the baby is clinging to, and it just spoke to us. So I'm going to talk about just one phase of 3 in the Supporting Father Involvement project, and near the end, Phil will come back and talk about how that's related to the new project in Oklahoma that Marc Taylor is going to tell you about. But here there were 289, almost all low-income Mexican-American and European-American couples in 4 California counties. 3/4 of them were married, and most of them had incomes below the poverty level. And we randomly assigned them either to a single meeting, which was our control group. It was with a group of couples, and we met just once with them, or a fathers-only group or a couples group. And here, having that control group and the fathers group pitted against a couples group taught us some things. In both the fathers and the couples groups, the fathers become more involved in their children's care. And the children's problem behaviors over time after the intervention did remain stable. But in the fathers-only groups, the father's satisfaction as a couple declined, whereas when we were working with the couple, the satisfaction remained stable, and the parents also reported less parenting stress. So we were getting more bang for our buck, so to speak, by working with both parents. Now, Marc Taylor is going to describe a project in Oklahoma City called True Dads, where some of these principles are in action, and then Phil will come back at the end and tell you a little bit about the very preliminary results from that project, because it's modeled on these ideas that I've been discussing. Over to you, Marc.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Yeah, this is Marc Taylor with True Dads out in Oklahoma, and I've had the privilege to be working with the Cowans over the last 3.5 years as we created this new project called True Dads. And True stands for trustworthy, responsible, united, and educated. Those are the traits that we like to foster in our program. And I've just realized I failed in my presentation coming up to talk about our random controlled trial that we've just gone through, or we're in the middle of. We just finished recruiting, and we still have a year follow-up. But that's where the outcomes that Carolyn was mentioning are coming from. So we actually have a control group and a treatment group, and going through a rigorous study there. But let me tell you a little bit more about our program, and then get off to our question and answers as quick as we can. So True Dads, like I said, it's based in Oklahoma City, and our strength-based program focuses on building a working alliance with dads to help them achieve family success. Fathers and father figures must be 18 years or older when we emphasize on the 18 to 24, and they have to have a child 12 years or younger, and we emphasize on 0 to 4. Again, how Carolyn was saying, we try to get them as early as possible. The father must have a co-parent attend the program with him, and we define the co-parent as the other adult helping to raise the child. While this is usually an intimate partner, we have seen grandmothers, grandfathers, and other friends and family members step into that role. Because the father and co-parent aren't always in an intimate relationship, we call them parenting teams instead of couples. True Dad's program services are primarily delivered through a series of workshops beginning with 18 hours of core curriculum that parenting teams attend together. Research shows that the greatest number or more significant impacts are achieved when fathers participate in workshops with a co-parent. For this reason, we created True Dads and designed it for fathers and co-parents to proceed through the core content groups together, so they share learning experiences that help them align their expectations, learn skills to improve communication, create a stronger commitment to shared parenting. So approximately 15 dads and 15 co-parents are assigned to each workshop cohort and participants are encouraged and incentivized to make up missed sessions. In addition to core content, True Dads offers 3 supplemental tracks. We have the parenting, we have healthy marriage and relationship education, and we have employment. The supplemental tracks all build on the lessons delivered during the initial 18 hours of the workshops. The services are bundled and presented together at intake to create a seamless transition from one to another, reducing attrition that could become an unintended consequence of this kind of specialization and potentially supporting take-up rates from the supplemental content. Though they can change their preferences while completing their core workshops, during intake, dads preliminarily select one of these tracks for their intake focus. On an as-needed basis, parenting teams also have access to individualized case management/coaching, referrals to mental health and substance abuse services, and specialized job training opportunities. So our curriculum is, we have an adaptation of On My Shoulders, which is produced by PrEP, Prevention and Relationship Enhancement Program. On My Shoulders is a unique interactive curriculum designed to equip men with the skills needed for healthy relationships, especially between co-parents and with their children. Themes include communication, stress, co-parenting, commitment, discipline, and gratitude. In consultation with the program's research team and partners, PrEP re-envisioned the On My Shoulders curriculum specifically for True Dads, creating a unique approach to a fatherhood intervention that engages both fathers and their co-parents. With the adapted curriculum branded True Dads On My Shoulders. Still smart there with our words, but not only did the adaptation acknowledge a co-parent will be present for workshops, it also added employment/economic stability and additional parenting topics to fully address the 3 main focus areas needed for a father to succeed and to meet the requirements of the Office of Family Assistance, through who we receive our funding. True Dads On My Shoulders is offered to program participants in 3-hour sessions over 6 weeks, totaling 18 hours. So the supplemental parenting intensive was specifically designed for True Dads with the idea of providing additional support for the co-parenting relationship at the request of fathers. Based on evidence from the Supporting Fatherhood Involvement Program/study, Drs. Phil and Carolyn Cowan, as we've heard, guided public strategies in developing the curriculum specifically for True Dads to be delivered to parenting teams. The curriculum is an adaptation of the Cowan's Supporting Father Involvement curriculum. Our supplemental relationship intensive utilizes the evidence-based PrEP 8.0 HMRE curriculum and is designed for fathers and their significant others to improve essential relationship skills such as communicating effectively, working as a team, solving problems, managing conflict, preserving and enhancing love, and commitment and friendship. Dads participate in this intensive with a romantic partner. So in some cases, the co-participant is not the co-parent who joined the father in the core content. In those cases, there's an onboarding session for the romantic partner to teach the core skills needed to engage in the workshops. Only fathers will participate in our final supplemental track, which is the employment track. If chosen as their intensive focus, fathers are enrolled in Work Forward, an up to 60-hour work preparation workshop, and it lasts up to 2 weeks in duration, developed by a collaboration called Work Ready Oklahoma. A new cohort begins every 2 weeks, is offered during daytime hours. As a participant in Work Forward, individuals receive an assessment of their education, job skills, engage in vigorous job readiness training, and access a job placement team with a robust employer network representing in-demand occupations and strong track record of connecting participants with job earning higher wages. Participants also have access to on-site resource center stocked with computers, office supplies, and other materials to aid in their job readiness. An employment development specialist is also available to assist participants in improving work readiness skills, such as developing an effective resume. Fathers can participate in the employment intensive track while they're concurrently participating in True Dad's On My Shoulders workshop, our core content. For the parenting and the relationship tracks, those follow the 6 sessions of On My Shoulders core content, and they build on the information learned in that core. Offering the intensives on this schedule adapts True Dad services to real-life needs that low-income fathers experience as they face differing priorities, challenges. So a little bit about our coaches. Each dad is assigned a fatherhood employment coach, an FEC. The primary functions of an FEC are to encourage participation in curriculum completion. They reinforce curriculum concepts, support the employment goals, needs of fathers, and make appropriate referrals to services we do not directly offer, with a special emphasis on specialized job trainings and mental health / substance abuse services when appropriate. FECs engage fathers and their co-parent in initial case management office visit, during which time FECs help dads set goals and create a plan for success according to their specific needs and desires. They also discuss the workshop schedule, the importance of consistency in their participation, and the goal of completing all workshop sessions. Based on the initial assessment / case management meeting, FECs are responsible for coordinating referrals if there are any additional needs that we, IMCI, that's our parent company, or if there's another community partner to meet. Additional office visits are scheduled depending on specific goals and the needs of the father. Throughout their involvement in True Dads, FECs maintain weekly contact with fathers to support the program engagement and to remain accessible should additional case management or referrals be needed. FECs make workshop reminder calls the day of the workshop. If a parenting team misses a session, the FEC contacts them the following day to discuss the barriers that prevented them from attending. The FEC will assist the father in problem solving and identifying appropriate resources and supports to promote successful completion of the workshop series and achievement of their stated goals. TD educators, so our True Dad educators, those are the facilitators of our workshops. They can also refer fathers back to the FECs if they determine there might be need for additional assistance learning the skills taught in workshops, or if they see or express any case management needs during workshops, pass that on to the coach. So the FECs and our educators also utilize the unique opportunity to meet fathers during mealtime in conjunction with our workshops to promote a positive working alliance, encourage ongoing participation, and provide support as needed or requested. Both the educators and the coaches provide linkages to community services, utilizing our IMCI's robust network of community partners to help address a range of family needs. Then finally, we have our program supports, understanding the difficulties of our target population faces in the wide geographic area of Oklahoma City metropolitan area. We work intently on supporting each father's ability to attend workshops consistently and meet their stated goals. To remove potential barriers to workshop participation, fathers are offered various supports, such as transportation assistance in the form of gas cards or scheduled transportation to and from workshops. We also have a small stipend to help defray the cost of childcare. We capitalize on our community relationship and have procured additional free off-site child care options that parenting teams utilize while attending our workshops, which has been very valuable. Fathers also earn incentives in the form of reloadable cards for completing surveys, reaching program benchmarks. These incentives are highly regarded by participants, with many facing significant economic challenges and barriers. We believe they're critical to maintaining consistent participation in our voluntary program. My last couple slides are tips that I would give to fatherhood programs or just fathers in general, but I'll pass on those so we can get on to finish up with the Cowans and get to the Q&A at the end.
Thanks, thanks, Mark. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we're finding so far in True Dads. What Mark talked about is the incredible team at Oklahoma has recruited more than 1,000 parenting pairs over time, over a couple of years. 600 of them have been randomly assigned to the intervention and 400 to the controls. They fill out a lot of questionnaires at the baseline. They fill them out on iPads so we can get the data directly. And then a year later, they're followed up. There's some government questionnaires in the middle, but I'm not going to talk about that. And as Jamie said and Mark said, about 85% of our people are intimate partners of one kind, unmarried, wives, ex-partners, but there 15% of them are a very different array, a dad and his mother or father, a friend, a brother, a sister, etc. So the groups are pretty heterogeneous. And here are the interim results, and I've been cautioned to say that these are interim. They're the first 300 couples or co-parenting teams that have been recruited. They're not the final answer, but here's what we've said. We've compared them, the people who participated in these workshops Mark described and the people who didn't. The people who participated in the workshops described themselves as less depressed, less angry, less anxious than they were when they came in, and then the control group people were. I'm going to skip the child for a minute. They also report more constructive communication. They report less violence in their relationship, which we think is really important, more collaborative parenting, greater job satisfaction, less harsh parenting, and they describe their child as less shy and withdrawn. Again, all compared to the control group 8 months after the intervention ended. So our general conclusion is that when you work with co-parents and couples, we've seen program effects on parenting and the couple relationship, but it's more successful than when you work with both parents together than when you work with dads only. Now, I understand we're at the prevention end, and so we've been able to get dads, although we've been also able to recruit couples in our third go-round of supporting father involvement who have been referred from the Child Welfare Service for reasons of abuse or neglect. So we can get those parents to come to groups too once we are assured that they're not currently committing abuse or neglect or intimate partner violence. And we also think that a curriculum shouldn't just address parenting and co-parenting relationships and couple issues, but also cover the outside stresses of life, how to enlist social support, how to think about what you want to take from the families you grew up in and what you want to avoid. So I will stop here and turn it back to Nigel. You can get more information on our website or by emailing us directly.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Phil and Carolyn and Mark and Aaron and James. So we've got a few questions that have come in. We are hoping to have a little bit of conversation about some specific questions, but before we do this, I'll put those questions up there now just so the presenters can be having a look at those, and we'll talk about these for a few minutes. But before that, I do want to make sure that we respond to some of the questions that have come in. So if I could just actually quickly follow up with you, Carolyn and Phil. There was a couple of questions for you. One was asking about the research that you cited on one of your early slides about the involvement of the father with the children being dependent on the relationship with the mother. And I believe the resources you had cited there were Carlson et al. For 2011 and Pruitt and Johnson for 2004. Can you add anything on that? I mean, if not, then the person who's asking the question, they can find that resource by downloading the slides.
One of the ways they can either look at the slides or directly email me. I don't have the whole full reference, but we've published that fact. The Carlson reference is from the Fragile Families project at Princeton. The Pruitt reference is an early one, but we can add it to the materials or email us.
Okay, that's fine. Yes. So whoever wants any more information on that, you can email Phil and Carolyn directly. You can also email the Fatherhood Helpline, and we can help get that information for you. Let me see. What else have I got here? So James, Marc talked a little bit about the incentives that the True Dads program has been offering for couples to participate. Have you got any incentives for the couples who've been in your studies to encourage them to come in?
We do, and I would just say I've learned a lot from our Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg that we ought to be thinking more broadly about not just calling them incentives, but about actually compensating parents for their time and energy. We all get paid when we go to do these things, and the expectation that folks are going to show up for free is pretty disrespectful. So it's a different way of thinking about things. It's not like a carrot. It's sort of like we respect you enough that you're coming here, and we're being paid, and you all should be compensated as well. So that's a philosophical statement. That's not a statement of, what are your gift cards or that sort of thing. But I like that way of thinking about things because it helps us to balance the playing field and see families as, having their time being as valuable as ours. So, yeah, we do provide all the things that Marc talked about. If they have got other kids from other relationships and they can't come because they got nobody to watch them, there's child care. There's Uber service to get them there if they don't have transportation. There's an incentivization system for completing the surveys as part of the research. And then there's a very small compensation, $50 for completing all 6 of the intervention sessions. So mom gets $50, dad gets $50. And, an investment of $100 in a family to take advantage of a curriculum that's helping to shape the co-parenting relationship for their kid, I don't think that's too much to ask for. So I think we ought to be thinking more broadly about, how we work with families in that way, and be wonderful to see these kinds of funds being made available, not just to lure parents into our project, to compensate them for the time, energy, and effort they're spending on behalf of the kids.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. And I think that is the big difference between asking people to be in a research project and asking them just to come to a program that's going to be of general help. So, Aaron, a couple of questions on the call center. First of all, do you have anyone on the line who can speak in anything else besides English, or is it English only when they call in?
We do have a Spanish-speaking caseworker who's in. Lately, he's been in 3 times a week, but at least once a week. And, for those occasions, we'll absolutely make all efforts to connect a caller with him.
Okay. So can people leave a message if they call when he's not there? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then
there was one... Great. Yeah. No, I know you all are. Yeah. Yeah. And then there was one inquiry here that was... This may be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I'm not sure, but it's a general question that you can respond to. But the question is, will you all be able to help me be able to see my children? Do you want to say a little bit about what you would do when you get that kind of call? Because obviously that's the kind of call that people call for. What do you do to help people see their children?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, I would say to the person who asked that question that I just would want to learn more about what's going on. Just similar to the presentation I just made, I'd like to learn more about what's happening, what's the unique situation that you're facing. Probably, it sounds like this would be a referral to Parent Help, and Parent Help, would again just try to get all the details and then work from there. Meeting the caller where they're at. So, as I was saying before, everybody's situation is different. There's just any number of situations I could picture that the questioner to be in. So I guess that's how I'd have to respond, is just with curiosity. I certainly would want to hear more.
Yeah. No, and I think that's exactly why the work you do there is so invaluable, because you do hear the story, right, and then you help walk them through and figure out what steps can be taken and what resources are available.
Exactly. We're always
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, after that, I guess in essence, we're just always exploring options. Any options available to the caller is where we will go in the discussion.
Okay. So. Let me see. There was one more question for Carolyn and Phil about how you measure the dad's improved involvement in the family life. Can you just speak to that briefly?
Right. Each partner fills out a scale of about 15 items that list common things that fathers and mothers do with their kids, bathing, dressing, taking them to the doctor, things like that. And they're asked to fill out on a 1 to 9 scale. 1 means she does it all. 9 means he does it all, which is kind of unlikely. And each of them fills it out, and what we find is that they generally agree. And what happens is that it moves significantly towards the dad doing more than he was doing before.
Okay, great. Okay.
Who does what is called.
Pardon? Okay. So, Marc, we've got a few questions for you. I'm not sure we can get all of them, but let me see here. First of all, is the True Dad's curriculum available for review or for other people to use?
I think that would probably be a question for PrEP, since it's their product. I don't know the answer to that. I think it is, but I'm not sure. Okay.
Well, I would encourage anyone who's interested then just to email Marc, and we'll have his contact up at the end, and he can connect you with whoever's the person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, and you may have covered this in your presentation, Marc, but somebody asked, how do fathers get referred to your program?
Yeah, so our number one referral source right now is radio. So we've found a local radio partner that really speaks to our target demographic. And so we do radio ads. We do an interview once a week, which is probably the most beneficial thing. So it's anywhere from 2 minutes to 5 minutes. And we have one of our intake workers that goes, and sometimes one of our educators, that they'll go and have an interview with the on-air host, and they'll just talk about what True Dads is and go through that. One thing we did notice when we first started advertising, we had a male voice for our ads talking about True Dads, and we experimented with doing some with male voices and some with female voices, and we noticed that we were getting more responses from the female voice than we were from the male voice, and the messages were pretty similar, and so that was kind of an interesting thing we stumbled across. But so radio is by far the number one, and then number two, it's just family and friends, word of mouth is referrals. We get out into the community to our parole and probation office. We go to schools. WIC, because we do go to recruit the co-parent, we'll go to WIC classes as well. If we can find a mother there that thinks that the father of her child needs some further assistance with being a better father, then we can do some recruitment there as well.
Okay. And there was also a question about where your funding for the incentives come from. I assume that comes from the OFA Responsible Fatherhood grant that you have, right?
Correct. Yeah, all of our funding comes from OFA, and they have a small allowance that we're allowed to use to pay for those incentives and program supports and kind of things.
Okay, and just one more question for you. There was a question about the fact that you are recruiting for a control group, and the question is, how do you plan on recruiting with the age limits that you have, and what do you do with fathers who don't fit the criteria? Do you refer them out to other resources?
No, so as long as they're 18 or older, they can be included in the study, and so the Cowans are going through and they can do their analysis on different age groups once they have that, but we try to focus on that younger. So when I say that, that means when we're doing our recruitment efforts, we keep in mind the person we're trying to get is that 18 to 24-year-old father. If we have a 32-year-old father that comes in, and he still qualifies, he has a child that's 12 and younger and has a co-parent, then we'll still accept him. It's just they have to be 18 or older is the only hard qualification.
Okay. And now I've got a couple of sort of general research questions. So this is probably something that James or Carolyn and Phil could respond to. So first one is, where can practitioners find resources about co-parenting for families who have experienced intimate partner violence or child abuse and neglect? Have you got any sources where people could find more information on that? I know you talked about it a little bit, James, in terms of how you're trying to move the needle on that.
We're trying to build that knowledge base, Nigel. Honestly, Phil and Carolyn may have a better sense than I do, but I think that historically what we've done is when there's been aggression in the home, it's sort of to keep the parents apart, focus on the custodial parents, try to do some remedial work with the non-custodial parent if there's going to be visitation or he's going to be seeing the child or she's going to be seeing the child, but to actually build a co-parenting alliance during that period of time. The co-parenting specific materials are relatively slim, but Phil and Carolyn may have some creative connections that would be helpful. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and it's obviously an area where one has to tread very carefully. I know you worked with the child welfare population quite a bit in California, Phil and Carolyn. So have you got anything to add to that? Yeah.
Two things. One is that we do a very careful screening. If we ask them to refer to us, which we do, they have to kind of assure us that this is a family who's been through at least some services, and so they're not violent at the moment. And then we do our own careful screening, separately interviewing the dad and the co-parent. If there is instance of ongoing violence and abuse, we refer them immediately to other services. But I do want to say that even though we were concerned at the beginning and our staff was concerned, that when you bring people who have experienced family violence into a group, it doesn't escalate the conflict. In fact, it brings it down. And we've had a lot of success with people in the child welfare system who have been part of violent families. In other words, it's not always that you need to refer them out.
Okay.
So we're trying to be careful about taking them in the first place, as Phil was saying, if there is a concern about something violent or abusive going on right now. They would not be appropriate for example, for the Supporting Father Involvement Project, and I think for True Dads as well. And we hook up with other programs who are in a place to work with families at that stage. When Phil referred to the fact that in our last trial of supporting father involvement, we did have some families referred by Child Welfare Services to our program because they thought it might be helpful to them. They were always families who had, where those things had been addressed first.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Okay. And I'd like to just join in too, Nigel. I really want to echo what Phil and Carolyn are emphasizing here. I mean, I think that the growing point for us is to really try to do all we can to engage families where they haven't reached the point, there may be situational aggression or violence going on in the home, but to be very cautious and careful. You don't want to bring anyone in where there's this sort of controlling, dangerous stalker kind of violence. But some of the other aggression they see comes from an ability to communicate and problem solve, and you want to help folks to develop better ways of working together. So my co-investigator on our project, my co-investigator on our project is Carla Stover, and folks who are not familiar with Carla's work, she's done some work with dads and then tried to build co-parenting from the work that she's doing with the dads, and has had some mixed success with that, but she's done a little bit of writing on that, and her work's really terrific as well. So Stover is her last name for folks who want to look into something that she's done.
Okay. And just one quick question, which is also for the three of you researchers, but it says, do you believe that following an evidence-based father-only program can be used as a beginning point prior to a co-parenting curriculum for great results? You got any opinions on that?
I love that question. I think it's a terrific question. I believe yes. I believe that you start with where your sample population is. And if you think that you can reach fathers only, and we did some groups with fathers only, and they had some benefits, and then a next step would be to introduce them to their work with them and their co-parents.
Okay, perfect.
Go ahead, Carolyn. Go ahead.
Well, what I would say is it depends a little bit on the orientation of the people in the community who are going to offer a program. And if the idea is to work with fathers only because that's simpler and not so complicated, then I would think, let's talk some more before you do that. If you don't have a choice, then I agree with what Phil said. We did test the two against each other in the very same communities, that is fathers only or couples, and did find, as Phil said, that there were more benefits if we could work with both co-parents. So it depends a little bit on your orientation, and the orientation that you approach people with has a lot to do with what they respond to.
Mm-hmm. I know we're at the end of time. I wanted to get in the last 15, 20 seconds. Building a co-parenting alliance, I completely agree with Phil and Carolyn. It's a process. We've seen 140 families. None of them fell from the sky. There had to be work done with mom in terms of preparedness, work done with dad in terms of preparedness, and then the bringing together once they were both entertaining the possibility of co-parenting. So it's not something you can microwave. It's really something that has to play out over time. So I think it's really important for people to recognize.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and so I brought us back to this slide here. I had hoped that we'd have a few minutes to get everyone's input on this, but unfortunately we are at time. So I'm just going to quickly run through these slides and say a few things that I think are relevant, and we will be talking about this in the brief that I mentioned that we're working on at the Clearinghouse that will be published sometime in the fall, because obviously a lot of you are working with programs where your primary target audience is the non-residential father. So how do you pull him in, and I know that there's quite a few programs out there that have got staff who are specifically reaching out to the mother. For instance, the Father Support Center in St. Louis, they have social workers who go and talk to mom and then help her see that, that they're not just on the father's side, that they are actually helping this father change so that she can perhaps trust him a bit more. And if she's being the one who's the problem as well, then they can help talk to her as well. But to bring the focus to the child for both of them. And there's a program. In fact, I see Harold Howard is on the call today with us. He's with Talbot House in Cincinnati, and they just recently hired a female staff person who has been doing the same thing, going out and meeting the mothers and bringing them in, and they're being very careful about the way they talk about this. They're talking about it as services that are intended to improve things for the child, and they want to work with both parents to the extent they can to make that possible. I know that the Center for Urban Families in Baltimore, they also have staff who encourage mothers to come in and see what they're doing in the center, so they get a sense of how the father is growing, what he's learning. So what we have on these last few slides, and then I will let you all go here, this is the Parenting Apart packet that Aaron mentioned. There's some really good stuff in there. You can download it from the box if you haven't already, and but be quick because we're going to be leaving this pretty soon. And you can also look at the page that has some specific communication skills, things you can work on with dad. So if you're only working with dad and you can't get to mother, then you can at least help him think about ways to represent himself to her, to show that, hey, I'm trying to change, but to talk to her in a way that's not going to be confrontational. And there's some similar tips from Carolyn and Phil that we have on 2 slides here, but they're also available to download there, and they will be available on the website within a few weeks after this. If you don't have time to download them today, email our Fatherhood Helpline, and I'll make sure you get those. Just send your email to me. This is an activity in the toolkit that I think is particularly helpful. You can download that from our toolkit. It's in the activities section on reflection and awareness. We've got a number of things there that can help fathers to put themselves in the shoes of their kids and think about, and often a lot of the fathers in the programs have been through this themselves as kids, but to put themselves in the situation where they can see this from the perspective of their kids, and if mum and dad are continually arguing, that's not doing the kids any good. So anyway, that was a real quick look at that. I apologize that we didn't have more time, but if we did get other questions come in that we didn't answer, I will ask the presenters if they can send us a written response. Here you do have their emails, and again, you can download the slides. If you haven't got them yet, send us a message to help@fatherhoodgov.info, and we will send any materials that you missed. We'll respond to any questions that you missed, and we will look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. In the meantime, there's going to be a survey pop-up after this. We encourage you to give us your feedback and any suggestions for future webinars. We'll be doing our next one on September 18th, so we hope to see you all then. Thank you very much for your time, and goodbye. And thank you very much to the presenters. Excellent presentations.
And that concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation.